Welcome to On the Water and in the Field, Cornell Cooperative Extension of Suffolk County's news magazine show. Hi, I'm Kim Barber, your host, and today we are bringing you our show from the Wednesday night sailboat race, right here in the middle of the Peconic Estuary. This race has been quite the summer event for many years. We'll provide some information and history on the race a bit later, but first, on today's show, we're going out to Cornell Cooperative Extension of Suffolk County's Marine Environmental Learning Center out in Southold. Here we have our own CSI-type lab that we utilize to process various types of samples. We'll learn more about the information gained from the analysis of these samples and how it helps our local municipalities make decisions regarding our waterways in efforts to keep them clean and safe. Next, we'll be bringing you to the big Wednesday night sailboat race out here in Great Peconic Bay. It's a weekly summertime tradition that brings you around Robbins Island to the finish line right off of New Suffolk. Then we'll journey underwater to learn more about eelgrass, a species that was once very prolific and found in nearly all of our local creeks and bays. To combat these losses, Cornell Cooperative Extension Marine Program staff are busy restoring eelgrass in areas that historically supported it but have since suffered population losses. We'll follow the eelgrass team and watch them in action as they conduct a buoy-deployed seeding operation in Mauritius Bay. We have a fun and informative show for you today, so hang on, and here we go. The EPA considers stormwater pollution the nation's greatest threat to clean water. Suffolk County and Cornell Cooperative Extension have been working together to combat this type of pollution in efforts to keep our local waters clean. One of the ways Cornell Cooperative Extension's marine program is doing this features the use of DNA coliform and water sample analysis to help municipalities make decisions regarding our water. We are now going to talk to Scott Curatolo-Wegman, our stormwater specialist, about the process.
The purpose of the lab here is to test the water bodies here and to usually educate the different municipalities where the water body lays about what's in their water. And the big one that we do is we do bacteria enumeration. So we can go in, and when there's areas that people are concerned about for either shellfishing or sometimes even bathing, we can go in and just get a water sample and just kind of see how much bacteria is in the water. And that kind of gives municipalities, a general idea of what's going on. And a lot of time that's all usually dictated by the New York State DEC anyway for shellfishing. What we do with coliform enumeration is it's the amount of a particular pollution or pollutant that you're going to find. So the enumeration in this case is bacteria, and a lot of what we look at is specifically E. coli bacteria, and that ties into with our other major project in the lab, which is the bacterial source tracking. But usually you want to get that baseline just to see where the high levels of pollutants are, and that's going to be your bacteria loading, and that's the enumeration, so that we can see where the hot spots are, of where there's going to be problems and where there's going to be inputs, so that hopefully we can educate people as far as what's going into the water, how they can affect it, and how they can take part in kind of managing the water that they all use recreationally or even for eating in case of shellfish. When we talk about illicit discharge, that's when there's something coming out of the pipe that shouldn't be. All pipes, in this case, the stormwater pipes, are meant to convey stormwater. Illicit means that there's something other than stormwater coming through that pipe. So illicit can be, by backtracking, it could be someone who doesn't even know that they're tapped into the system. Sometimes with some of these older systems, before there were rules set in place, people didn't know what they were, and they just kind of tapped into them as a way to get rid of their wash water or, in really bad cases, wastewater. So by detecting the amount of bacteria we're finding in water that, again, could be illicit in that it hasn't rained in 48 to 72 hours, we can kind of backtrack and kind of detect where that may be coming from to try to, better manage what's going into the bays and also kind of fix a problem that could be getting worse. Our biggest project that we use the water lab for is probably with the Suffolk County Stormwater Program, and within that is going to be the Illicit Discharge and Detection Elimination Program. Now, the stormwater program is a federally mandated program that comes from the EPA, So we kind of help them manage their program for the stormwater. And again, within that, we do the water testing. And that includes looking at all the outfall pipes or any county roads that may be discharging to water bodies. So basically, we're within every township within the county. We have about 300 different outfalls within the county, going all the way from the border at Nassau County all the way out to Orient Point and Montauk Point. So we cover a large amount of area looking at these different pipes that may be discharging stormwater. And then it goes along with that, whenever we find anything coming out of those, we are testing it. So we're looking at bacteria inputs from, from all the townships within Suffolk County. One of the things we've developed over the years in response to, that's great, we know the amount of bacteria going in the water, but we developed a nice tool that would help us answer who. And that is our DNA component, and that's our bacterial source tracking. That is pretty much, I don't think anyone else on Long Island is doing. And it allows us to then answer that question of who. So that when we take a sample, we can then say, well, yes, there's this much bacteria coming from it. We can run it through our DNA lab. It's kind of like a police blotter of fingerprints. We can use that then identifying fingerprint for our animal database, run the water sample through, and it can tell us whether we're talking about a human here, whether we're talking about a goose, or we're talking about wildlife or deer or something like that. The goal of this, hopefully with the DNA, is that we can then tell a municipality like the Suffolk County that these are the inputs. They can then take a look at those inputs, hopefully change that, and then provide a better area for recreation, for shellfishing, and then everyone benefits as far as even economically with the shellfishing. So a tool like this can definitely, benefit everyone from the county down to the public, and really, helps protect our waterways and helps us enjoy the best of this great resource that Suffolk County has.
The lab and the Marine Center are open to the public during the week, so if you would like to visit the facilities, give a call at 631-852-8660 to arrange a tour. Also, if you would like to learn more about stormwater runoff and how you could prevent it, go to www.suffolkstormwater.com for more information about Suffolk County's stormwater program. Behind us is Robbins Island, the focal point of the Wednesday night sailboat race. This sailboat race has been a tradition on the east end of Long Island for many years. Let's talk to our host, Bob Goodale, about the history of the race, how it got started, and some of the traditions and fun stories about the races over the years.
Bob and Patty Goodale of the yacht The Polar Sea have been racing the Wednesday night sailboat race since almost the beginning. Mostly it's a good excuse to get out on the water, but for some the race is a training ground for other bigger races. But for Bob and Patty, it's more of a time to be together and enjoy what our Long Island bays have to offer.
Wednesday night race is what we call a beer can race. That means there's no real official start, although we'll have an unofficial start it sometimes with a 5-minute warning and then a start. It starts out in Cutchogue Harbor and goes around Robbins Island, depending upon the date. If it's an odd day, we go an odd way, which would be clockwise. And if it's an even date, we go around counterclockwise. The race started with just people going out, and Wednesday seemed to be a good time to sail. Apparently all over the island, there's people that go out on Wednesday nights, generally at 6 o'clock, so that people can be home from work and go out. I believe that the Wednesday night race sailing around Robbins Island started around 1980. What I do before the race is I try to get my crew assembled by 5:30, and the race starts at 6 o'clock. So a lot of times people are coming from somewhere and they get here a little later. It's okay. We try to get out and get the mainsail up, which is the rear sail, which is easy to control because when you come about, switch the sail from one side to another, it is easy. Nobody really has to duck, get around. With that, we get up to the starting line and try to see which way the wind will actually be blowing and which is the preferred side of the course line. Boats with the wind coming over the starboard side have the right of way. At the beginning of the race, you have up to 40 boats trying to occupy the same space. And it would be much like cars on the Long Island Expressway are all doing 70 miles an hour. As long as everybody does 70 and doesn't try to change lanes, it's all perfectly safe. Here, these boats are doing like 5 miles an hour, and they're all trying to go the same direction, but sometimes you can't. So they go the other way, and then you have to fend off. There's been masts broken when boats collide. There's been egos scratched. I always tell people on my boat, do not put your arms out to prevent a boat. Boat can be replaced, your arms can't be. People's philosophy is, of course, it's a race and they want to win. Some people want to win more than others. They will take everything out of their boat completely, and they will only use a sail for a race. And that way, every time you use a sail, it stretches out, gives a different configuration. It would be much like having an airplane wing that somebody hit with a sledgehammer. It doesn't fly right. So if you get a new sail, they go as fast as they can. I've seen boats, class boats, where there's 5 of the same boats, and one of the participants in very light air is a mile ahead. My own philosophy is I'm out there to have fun. I don't want to get into any danger. Of course, I'd love to win. Once I won the whitebread race in my class. What makes this a real good race when we sail around Robbins Island is because we do switch direction. You are going on a triangular course, which gives you all the different points of wind. Some boats are very good when they go towards the wind, which is called pointing. A boat can't sail directly into the wind. It can only do about 45 degrees. Some of these race boats can actually go up to 30 degrees, especially if you have the tide, which is like a conveyor belt. If you're on that conveyor belt and it's moving with you, you go further forward. Sometimes over in the south race, it gets really, really rough, especially if the tide is against the wind. When the wind is going one way and the tide comes over, it squares up the waves and makes it really big. I've seen 25-footers that are standing on the peak of a wave and they get pushed around really big time. So that's why the boat was clockwise, the race, and then it was made counterclockwise so that the smaller boats could go with the waves and not fight so hard. And now it's like, well, let's give everybody equal time. There's the triangular course where we come up past the bob buoy, and if we're going clockwise, some of the boats sail out to the Nassau Point Green, which makes it a little longer course for them. And we all catch up in the south race, which is the southern sandbar of Robbins Island. You head west, go around the rock buoy, which is Robbins Island Rock. It was really nice. The Coast Guard painted that last year. Before that, instead of being a white and orange buoy, it was just kind of like a rust buoy. And there is a rock there, which has a lot of bottom paint on it from boats hitting it. Oh, well, I can miss that. Then we go past what I call the Commodore Point buoy, because it's kind of off the northwest corner of Robbins Island. And back, leaving the Robbins Island North Race green buoy to our right, and then finishing at the bob buoy. A lot of times people come out and they're camping on the beach to see the start of the race. A couple of weeks ago there was a food truck or two, and there's probably a couple of hundred people for the start of the race, and then the real huggers, they wait. A good race finishes in an hour. Not that I ever do an hour. I usually count my position from the back. Sometimes we take first, which means we're really last. But a couple of weeks ago we were actually 7th from the front. So that was a real good race. Some people after the race say, well, let's go home and do nothing. But I would say that a good portion of them go to the local watering hole, which is known as Legends. It's got very consistent, good food, but we go out and we have a good time, and then we come out and we raft up, which a bunch of boats will tie together on one anchor, put big bumpers or fenders between the boats, and we will cook. I have a barbecue on board, or we have an oven down below. I'll bring food, chicken, and we just all kind of hang out and relive the race. It makes it a real adventure.
While living the adventure on the Polar Sea, Bob had mentioned his boat's name, Polar Sea, came from his business he calls Polar Charters. The business is operated out of an old family building located right off of Schoolhouse Creek. His grandfather purchased the property back in 1920 during the Prohibition. The family built and ran a blacksmith business from the building originally, but it was Prohibition.
Polar Charters is the name of this place. That's why the boat is named Polar Sea, short for Polar Charters. This is the headquarters of the company. I have my captain's license, 100-ton. I take out sailing charters with the different bed and breakfasts. Harvest Inn does a weekly special, and they have a lot of customers that come out and are repeat business. So I started out with this. It was rotten about 6 feet up, and I started rebuilding it. We do some schooling. I've had some classroom instruction before we go out on the boat. We have family parties here. We have Thanksgiving here. I've actually had other service clubs like the Lions and the Kiwanis when they were in business. I've had the Conservative Party here. I've had Republican functions. I've had the Chamber of Commerce meet here. So I do whatever I can to do it. We have quite a kitchen. This is the dining room. It's 20 by 30 feet, and it probably has a 16-foot high ceiling in here. This was built by my grandfather. He came to New Suffolk in 1920, and his father-in-law built what is now the kitchen as a blacksmith shop. So it's all poured concrete that they did. And then the Roaring Twenties were here. My grandfather had come to work at the submarine base. New Suffolk had the first submarine base, and while they were doing the prototype and getting ready to deliver it to the Navy, he worked here. And as a mechanic, when they left to Groton, because they got the naval contract, he said, what do I do now? He started going offshore for the rum line. Prohibition was in effect. They would go off to the 3-mile line. He actually got to have a 110-foot boat. They would offload it right on the dock, sidewards, and then bring it in, and this was the warehouse, when they would then take it and distribute it here and there and everywhere.
This has been a fun race. I love the whole philosophy of the Goodales, that it's all about having fun and not winning. Thanks, Bob and Patty, for hosting the show and for letting us take part in this great event. So from on the water to under the water, now we're going to check out our eelgrass team in action as they work to set out a buoy-deployed seeding system in Moriches Bay as part of their overall eelgrass restoration efforts.
Kim Manzo, Steve Schott, and you know her as our host, Kim Barber, who is also a habitat restoration outreach specialist and works extensively with CCE's eelgrass program, are out collecting eelgrass flowers for the Barrier Beach Preservation Association to do an eelgrass restoration in Moriches Bay near Moriches Inlet.
We're going to circle around and check out where we want to place the flags, and we'll find a spot to anchor the boat, and that'll be our center point. We'll work from there. It's an ongoing project. We worked with them last fall doing our Marine Meadows program and established a small area which was our initial patch of eelgrass, and this year we decided, based on our observations from last year, that the site actually might be good for using seeds, eelgrass seeds, for restoration as well, which was a method we've used in the past and actually developed, which is being used all over the country now. This buoy deployed system, and we were looking to test it in this area this year to see if it would actually be beneficial to potentially increase that and go with a larger scale next year to help us with our final restoration goals for that area of Moriches. Funding is primarily being provided by Barrier Beach Preservation Association. So they've actually collected and sponsored the workshops that we've done at the Barrier Beach Preservation Association's clubhouse in West Hampton Dunes, and they've been very supportive. We've had members of the association that have been involved in many parts of this. And we actually, on the day that we actually collected the eelgrass flowers, we had a volunteer from the organization was out helping us. He was able to snorkel and collect some flowers, but he also got to see how the process was done, and it was good to have that kind of support.
So sometimes you could see how it's very different, it's very thin and branchy looking.
Yeah.
The other thing is these are a lot more fouled with like sponges and stuff right now. So that's one way you might see them from above. You'll see a lot of sponges and other stuff growing all over it.
The primary methods that we use for restoring eelgrass in Long Island has been using adult vegetative shoots. Eelgrass is a clonal grass. It spreads primarily by underground rhizomes, much like a lot of garden plants, and it's a vegetative spread, so it'll branch off and create more plants, and then they branch off. It also is a flowering plant, so it actually produces seeds underwater, and those seeds can be used for restoration purposes. On Long Island, our work has not had as much luck as other places, say the Chesapeake Bay or San Francisco Bay, with using seed, but we've had more success with using the adult shoots. So even though we have developed this buoy deployed seeding system, we haven't had a lot of success using the seed-based methods. So we rely primarily on using these adult vegetative shoots. The Moriches Bay area, specifically near West Hampton Dunes, the bottom in the site where we chose to do restoration seems like it's conducive to taking eelgrass seed and allowing it to germinate and establish. So this planting that we just conducted in the beginning of July is hopefully going to test that, and we'll see by the fall. Usually by October, the seeds will start to germinate as the water drops through about 50 degrees Fahrenheit, and into next spring we'll see how successful we've been with the seeds incorporating into the bottom and successfully germinating and starting to mature. So it'll be about a 9-month process from picking the flowers and putting them out in the buoy system to actually seeing if these seeds establish and start to become mature plants. Using eelgrass seeds or collecting flower shoots to collect the seeds is a more involved process than just showing up and picking them. We start off probably a month or two prior to when we think that the plants are going to be ripe. Typically for the South Shore estuary, we've seen flower shoots generally are ripe right around July 4th. So we tend to go down latest middle of June, and we'll collect some flower shoots. We'll bring them back to the lab and gauge how close to maturity they are. And as we get closer to the July 4th date, or if it's going to be sooner or later, we'll look and go more frequently to get an idea of how close we are. We want to collect the flowers. There's a 4-week window usually that the eelgrass flowers will release their mature seeds. So we shoot for target goal and window is the 2nd week of seed release. So we have to be sure that we're going to get it there, get down there and pick at that point so that we get the most out of the seeds, or else if we go too late, we'll wind up getting fewer seeds, and if we go too early, what can happen is if we pick the flower shoots and the seeds aren't mature yet, they could abort and we won't get any viable seeds. So it's a very detailed-oriented process where you have to pay attention to the timing based on the stages of development of the seeds. In this method, there's 2 ways that seeds are usually used in eelgrass restoration. Many times and in many organizations throughout the country, they'll collect the flower shoots and bring them back and hold them in tanks and let the seeds drop out into the tanks. Then they'll hold those seeds, collect the seeds and hold them until the fall, where they'll broadcast them out just like you would do for your grass seed on your lawn. The method that we developed skips the step of actually having to require a holding period and a facility to hold the seeds. What we do is kind of mimic what nature does. In a natural meadow, the seeds just get dropped out in July or into August in some cases, and they sit in the bottom until they're ready to germinate. So what we're doing is we're mimicking that natural process of seed release, but we're moving the flower shoots to where we want them to drop them out instead of just being in the meadows. So we collect flower shoots from a donor meadow, and we pack them into a net, an aquaculture pearl net, and those nets are hung or attached to a buoy system that's anchored in place, and these buoys are set out in grids. So the test grid that we planted for Mauritius Bay was a 4x4 grid. So there's 16 of these buoy, anchor, and nets with the flower shoots. And that covers a fairly good area. They're about 7.5 to 8 feet on center. And what happens is the anchors hold the buoys and the nets and allow them to swing freely with the changes in wind and tide. And as they swing around and the flowers slowly release the seeds work their way out of the nets and are dropped on the bottom. And depending on prevailing winds and currents, you can get a fairly broad arc of these seeds spread out and cover a fairly good area. And then basically we come back after about 2 to 3 weeks. We'll remove all of those systems, block the buoys and everything, so that there's nothing on the bottom to disturb the seedlings. And we just wait for the seeds to germinate in October, and we'll come back next spring, and the plants will be big enough, the seedlings will be big enough for us to evaluate their success.
That's that. That is the buds method.
It's a wrap.
Thanks to Steve and Kim and the entire eelgrass team for the hard work you do year-round to bring back this important species. We will keep coming back to update you on eelgrass projects across Long Island that Cornell Cooperative Extension's Marine Program is conducting in future shows, but that's all for now. Thank you for joining us. If you want more information about our projects or stories, or would like to help out or give back, go to Cornell Cooperative Extension of Suffolk County's website at www.ccesuffolk.org or give a call at 631-727-7850. See you next time on the water and in the field.
Cornell Cooperative Extension of Suffolk County is a not-for-profit 501c3 educational organization. All contributions are tax deductible. For more information on our programs or you'd like to get involved, please go to our website at www.cornellmarineprogram.com or www.ccesuffolk.org.